Is something not of this earth trying to push its way through? Has there been a rip in the fabric of our known universe and our so-called 3D world that has allowed another form of intelligence to influence the events and anomalies that many are witnessing these days? These are questions that I've been asking myself and others with increased enthusiasm for the last several months. Something is going on. For me, and like many of you, the mystery is deepening. The veil is lifting, or so it seems. And I have this sense that the people of our planet will soon be in for a big awakening. Now, I'm going to stress again, I don't look at this as a bad or a good thing, just a big thing. Hi, everyone. Alexis Brooks here from Higher Journeys, back with another episode of Conscious Commentary. And today I'm going to try to get my arms a little bit more around this idea of not just disclosure. Sure, we want to talk about that. Disclosure as within the context of disclosing the fact that we're not alone, but more the metaphysics that are surrounding maybe all of these things, including, and yes, I'm referencing the that famous December 16th date in which the New York Times and then others who followed suit came out with this secret Pentagon UFO assessment program. We're not going to focus too much on that today. We did cover that in the last Conscious Commentary, but rather I want to draw that in in the context of the metaphysics that seem to be permeating our reality right now. And I'll get to drawing a correlation between that and the timing of the announcement as we go through this episode. If we are indeed on the verge of something big, something the likes of which none of us have ever seen before, well, what would lead one to conclude that this is what's really going on? So I want to look at that. I want to draw from some conversations that I have had with several people, both on the air and in communication off the air, to maybe make a little bit of a case and show some evidence that we're living in strange times. And look, I don't think there's anyone that would disagree, whether mainstream or those that are sort of living in the metaphysical subculture. I think we all concur that there are just some we're living in mass strangeness. But what's driving it? Could it be something that is not man-made? I want to first quote and talk a little bit about my conversation with Sharon Milstein. Hopefully you all have by now had a chance to listen to my annual show with Sharon. She is our in-house numerologist extraordinaire, and she always has some wonderful, very insightful and inspiring things to say about where we have come from and where we are going. And so in this last show that we did with Sharon, sort of a 2017 in review and 2018 forecast, Sharon had some very interesting things to say in relation to UFOs, and particularly the announcement that came out. She referenced that herself and was very, interest was piqued. She talked a lot about, this is interesting because I've never really heard her talk in this way before, about her, I guess, cumulative interest or accumulating an interest in the subject of non-human intelligence, UFOs, artificial intelligence, holographic reality. I've never had that conversation with her until this last episode. I want to quote her on a couple of things, looking at my notes here, and then try to bring all of these comments from individuals that I have gathered into making a possible case that there's something strange going on, and there is definitely a metaphysical reality that's more prominent right now. So let me quote Sharon very briefly here. She says, "There is no question why now secret files are being released." She says of artificial intelligence and UFOs. Well, obviously, we know there is talk of AI. I don't know that it was in the same manner or within the same article as the UFO disclosure stories. Nonetheless, she says in the same context. It's a very metaphysical year that we are going into, 2018 and beyond. It's almost like we are going to be on a different planet. Things are evolving and being uncovered. Things are evolving and being uncovered. And we know that's the case, both exoterically, I say this all the time, as well as esoterically. Things are being uncovered. You know, one of the biggest, if not the biggest story of 2017 going into 2018 is these multiple stories of mass sexual assault. And I think that story is only going to get deeper and unfortunately darker. Nonetheless, uncovered. My conversation with Mary Rodwell, one of many I've had, and the most recent being when she was here visiting the States, and talked about the coming out of people in high levels of government, and politics and business and science, people that we would never think would disclose their own contact experiences that are now coming out. Things are evolving and being uncovered, Sharon Milstein says. She goes on to say, all these strange things that people are seeing or knowing or feeling, and we're going to get into that because a lot of people are seeing double numbers. I'm going to get into that next, actually. She says, it is the beginning of a new paradigm and that the truth is all coming out. And we're headed into a time that is going to be more about metaphysics and truth, is what she said. Let's go into double numbers because you all know I have been thoroughly intrigued. I used to be rocking the 1111 thing, as I've affectionately called it. Still am. But as I have said before, in my experience in the last several, probably closer to 4 or 5 months now, I have been bombarded with seeing doubles, not necessarily triples, but doubles. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, etc. So she says, I'm going to stick with Sharon. When I posed this to her, I said, I'm not going to let you go, you numerologist, you, without shedding some light on where this may be coming from and why now. And so she says, it has to do with getting our attention. She says, even people who don't know about numbers are noticing them more prominently. And I have to tell you, the first person I thought of was my interview with, when Jimmy Church had me on his show, and that issue of numbers and number anomalies came up, and he talked about his daughter, who he says has absolutely no interest in the metaphysics or the paranormal of anything, but had also recently been almost assaulted by these 11s or 1111 or some variation. And so he brought that up. He was shocked, he and Rita, his wife. I have another dear friend who a few months ago, who obviously knows of my work, but isn't necessarily into these subjects on the regular tip, said, Alexis, 44, everywhere, license plates, clocks, of course, receipts, you name it, everywhere. So Sharon says every number has a vibration. She says it's all about vibration. And it also has to do with certain people. I'm not necessarily quoting, I'm paraphrasing her at this point. A certain cultural group of people that are getting this frequency. In other words, not everyone is having these experiences. And by the way, this far surpasses seeing double numbers. This is just one little aspect, I suppose, of a very strange shift in our reality. But not everyone is experiencing them. But she believes that it's certain people that perhaps have a proclivity toward these things, or just I think she had mentioned something about the soul level of certain people. She put it as old souls, those that are the newer souls. This is how she put it. This is not necessarily my belief. It's just what she said, that the newer souls may not be as inextricably linked to these sorts of subtleties in our reality right now. And yet I would argue that there's some people that, just like Jimmy Church's daughter, not that she's a new soul, I don't know, she's young obviously, but had no interest whatsoever in these subjects, and yet the prominence of these numbers in her life she couldn't even ignore, so she brought it up to her dad. Penny Pierce. Let's talk about Penny. A couple things I want to say. Penny Pierce, I just had on the show last week. Wonderful discussion about her new book, Transparency, and again, just impeccable timing for the release of this book. She maintains, and she has maintained for some time, that unequivocally, this is about the increase in frequency and how we are being asked to come along. Come along. That's not to say that everyone is going to, but we are being challenged to resonate our own frequency and our own energy signature with the planet and the universe, the larger universe. Sharon calls this metaphysical newness, I suppose, the frequency being increasing. She really believes that metaphysics, generally speaking, will play a far more prominent role in all of our lives starting now. We've been leading up to it. Hence the anomalies and the just strangeness of things going on. Speaking of strangeness, I want to kind of bring us back to a rip in the fabric of this 3D world. And the idea, some have talked about, that a portal or portals may be more apt to open right now. Some by our own doing. I'm going to bring up one piece in particular that I found to be quite extraordinary, if it's authentic, as well as strange lights in the sky. Let me read you some headlines. I just wanted to look up strange lights in the sky. Just did a basic Google search to see what popped up. Interestingly, many of them, even though I wasn't Googling in the news section specifically, many of them were news stories recently. Specifically, some in late December, many happening stories of possible meteor lights, mid to right around now, right? We're January 20, I'm recording this on January 23rd. Around the 16th, 17th, 18th of January, there were a flood of reports that came in, dotting the globe, all the way to Australia, I believe, of people reporting strange lights in the sky. I'm going to read you a few of these headlines. This came in, this story, and this looks to be a little bit of a tabloid out of the UK, Daily Star, but nonetheless, this was actually on January 5th. The headline reads, Is this light an alien portal? Shock claims as video shows mystery object in the sky. Now, this was January 5th. I'm not going to go through the articles. I'm just going to read the headlines and see if you can kind of come up with the fact that there's some correlation here. This is right in my neck of the woods. And this was, December 27th. Possible meteor lights up night sky in New England. And I think I recall hearing that news report. I want to get to a couple of them that are more recent. This is on, interesting, 1/11, January 11th. This is actually a Newsweek article. Actually, let me hold off on that one because that's a little bit different. All related, but a little bit different. I want to get to some of these. Here's one here. Meteor credited for bright light, noise rattling Michigan. This one came out on January 16th, 2018. I'll read the first couple of lines from out of Detroit. This was Fox 31 News. But Detroit, it says, experts say a bright light and what sounded like thunder in the sky above Michigan was a meteor. The American Meteor Society says it received hundreds of reports of a fireball Tuesday night over the state, including many in the Detroit area. Reports also came in from several other states and Canada, and some Michigan residents reported their homes shaking. I'm not going to go any further into this. Maybe I can put a link to all these articles that I dug up just recently. But what I find strange about this one, now I'm not a meteor expert. I know there have been a lot of them reported lately. But from what I can recall, we typically don't have sound, I don't think, certainly not thunderous sound accompanying a meteor streak across the sky. So I found that a little strange. Here's another one, and this one is out of Canada. This might be the same part of the same report, January 17th. Dash cam video shot in Edmonton area captures strange bright light falling from the sky. Very interesting. I'm looking at some other headlines here. Bottom line is, if you Google yourself, go ahead, strange lights in the sky. I came up with about 100 and close to 120,000 results, many of them being news reports. Now, you're going to find a lot of obscure, sort of off-the-radar websites that will have some commentary on the history of such things, but I'm talking about recent news, so that's that. Okay. Portal. Strange lights in the sky. Strange dreams. Let's talk about dreams. And I want to bring back in here Penny Pierce. As a matter of fact, I want to play a little clip for you of my recent interview with Penny in which she talked about, now we're going to fold this all back into metaphysics and disclosure. Disclosure being the final realization wherever it happens to come from. Let's not have a preconceived notion as to where it should come from, but wherever it may be coming from seems to be more inevitable than ever. Penny talked about a dream that she had some years ago. She may have even said many years ago. Doesn't matter. That strangely almost mirrored exactly a dream that I had several years ago that I'm going to tell you about right after I play this clip. This is Penny talking about the dream that she had. Listen, take a listen. So that was a little, but again, not to go off on a tangent there, but metaphysically, do you think that there could be some timing? That's the thing that's just most curious to me. The time that this was released, all in the midst of this transparency, not having anything to do with the folks that put it out, but some other force that's nudging that hole in the paper to make it bigger, hopefully.
Yeah. I think it's all a function of the frequency of the planet.
Okay.
Honestly. And I had a very visionary dream many, many years ago where I saw the Earth from space, not too far out, but I saw all these clear balls of light flowing into and around the planet and piling up as though they were creating another layer around the planet. And they were all transparent and kind of glossy, diamondy light. And I knew they were beings who were coming to watch what was going to happen here on the Earth, because it was going to be a wonderful show, of transformation. And yet their very presence helped increase the frequency of the planet, just from the sheer number of them piling on, and in my dream it was called the Armada. I don't know what that has anybody else used that term, but that's what it was called. And they were all they were not interfering, but their presence alone was causing people to yearn and stretch up in frequency to try to find them and understand and communicate.
I have to tell you, I was shivering when she told that story. I did not, for whatever reason, get into, I think it was a time issue, but didn't have a chance to piggyback on her telling of that interesting dream of these sort of non-physical beings coming here and sort of nesting themselves on the planet. Didn't have a chance to tell her that I had a dream, folks, that mirrors, I'm going to say mirrors hers almost exactly. Here it is. I do bring it up very briefly in Miguel Mendonca's book, We're the Disclosure, just a little snippet, but I never went into the detail of this dream, and I'm not going to take a long time with it now, but this is just, again, part of the strange synchronicities that are happening right now. So Penny just told us about this dream in which these sort of glowing, clear balls of light or clear, I got the feeling she was describing almost like clear globes nesting themselves on the planet. My dream that I had, and I can recall it was in February of 2016, not that long ago, was I was looking up to the sky, was with several other individuals, and pointing to the sky as the sky was now blanketed with what appeared to be unidentified craft. But when I say blanketed, I mean you couldn't even see the sky. They were covering the sky. I pointed upward and they looked. And this, by the way, is a series of 3 dreams that I had. This is a third in a series of 3 dreams. And in each dream, I was pointing to the sky, noticing something. Others would look and would deny what they were seeing. They just did not want to notice strangeness in the sky, even though it was very visible to me. But in the third dream, I pointed up, motioned for everyone to look up, and everyone was shocked. No more denying what on earth is going on. Now, here's where it parallels or intersects or meets with Penny's dream. Guys, shivers here. I also dreamt that there were the release of these sort of clear, I describe them as light bulbs. They looked like clear 60-watt bulbs, except they weren't lit. They looked just very clear and transparent. And they were landing in the trees. And it was strange because I recall there were a lot of trees around. It seemed like we were on some hillside. A lot of trees around, but the leaves were not on the trees, which might denote wintertime. No leaves on the trees. But the bulbs were falling from the sky that was blanketed with these craft, and they were landing and getting caught in the trees, sort of nesting themselves in the trees. Clear balls. Very clear to me, this dream to this day. I don't recall much after that. I tell you what, though, when I was being interviewed by Miguel Mendonça, and I went into a lot more detail, obviously, during hours and hours of being interviewed by him, he didn't tell me, but the cover of We Are the Disclosure, both part 1 and 2, maybe I can put a visual up for you, was inspired, the cover art for the books were inspired by this dream that I told him. I'm looking at it right now. So what does that have to do with right now? Well, I don't know. Other than the fact that it came to the fore in my discussion with Penny, it helped me recall my own dream, which was nearly identical to how she described hers. The timing, I consistently think of the now and what's happening right now. Dreams becoming more explicit or, intricate and strange. Dreams, double numbers, portals opening. Listen to what, this is somebody who left a comment for me on one of the interviews I did. It may have been with Mary Rodwell, but she left this message, I believe it's a she, just recently. She says, I have images in my home, double images everywhere. She says, ETs everywhere. Maybe a portal open? Question mark. She goes on to say, something is not right. The skies are not right. I've been hearing from other people through various channels who have commented, Alexis, something strange is going on. I'm feeling a sense of foreboding. You've heard me talk about this before, but this has been a sustained state of affairs with a lot of people. Could there be some sort of I use the term metaphysical bleed through in my conversation with Sharon? I don't know. I'm opening up this conversation, folks, because I'd like for you to continue having it with your peers and your family, if you can, and friends. I have to reiterate that it is absolutely so imperative that we keep our eyes and our ears and our hearts open as we can. Right now, let's be as malleable as we can. I talk about reality being plastic and malleable and flexible. Well, I think we're going to have to mimic that. We've got to be. So for whatever is in the process of unfurling, we can get our arms around it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to bring up. So let's talk. Oh, there are a couple more things I'd like to bring up. So let's get back to this idea of disclosure, right? Let's see if we can sort of fold this in a little bit. And I have to tell you, I think I probably mentioned this in my last episode of Conscious Commentary, that despite this seeming to be a very well orchestrated announcement, for whatever their reason for doing so now and at all, there may in fact be another faction or factor, X factor we'll call it, that they're not even aware of. They being obviously the people that were about putting the story out, both the intelligence side as well as the media side. Something that John Rappaport said, bringing in a few of my guests here, because they say things that will stick with me, and I might marry their idea into something else or put it in another context, but it makes sense. Here's something that John Rappaport said. We were having a discussion about the revelation of mass sexual assault and abuse, etc. And I was approaching the conversation about this with him, coming from the standpoint of why is it so wall to wall? Obviously, at the time I was having the conversation, it was a bit more wall to wall than it is right now. Other things have taken its place. But he said something very interesting in terms of assuming that this story and others, we're talking about sexual assault, and any sustained headline, in many cases may actually be some sort of an operation or propaganda, an agenda that needs to be, that objectives need to be met. He says, as well planned as these operations, media operations are, they can take on a life of their own. Do you remember when he said that? Did you hear that interview? Great discussion. I'd urge you to go back and listen to it if you haven't. Well, that's what he said. And I thought, that's interesting. As well planned as these, some of them very intelligent operatives are, as well planned as their operations are, I should say, they can take on a life of their own. Might some other force, a force that has now penetrated, perhaps, our 3D space, be directing certain so-called operations, including the recent UFO Pentagon announcement, unbeknownst to those behind the announcement? Do you know what I mean? The timing, folks. It's the timing of the things that are happening, even though they may seem disparate and not connected, but the timing now has really piqued my interest in all of this. I just find it fascinating. I want to mention one more thing, and then I'm going to close this down because I know we're over. I'm not going to look at the time because I want to make sure I try to get in everything I wanted to bring up. There's this very interesting YouTube video. There's lots of interesting YouTube videos. And the question us folks always like to ask, particularly if they're high strangeness types of things, is this authentic? Now, I'm not one to go scouring for, strange lights in the sky, YouTube videos, and other strange things, but you're going to run into certain things every once in a while. And I happen to run into this video. It's interestingly, its length is 311. Of course, why wouldn't it be? It's called Gateway to Sedona. I'll link that as well. And it's basically about this whole idea of portals, right, that we're talking about. Are there more portals opening up right now? And if so, is something or someone or some faction coming through? Big questions. I'm not the first to ask at all. But this little video, if I can summarize, is a gentleman. I don't know his name. I don't know anything about this YouTube channel. But it sure has gotten a lot of views, well over 1 million at this point. Gateway to Sedona is filming an experiment in which he's using sound, pure tone, upwards of 500 hertz, in the mid 500s, somehow reflecting or bouncing off of a light beam in what looks to be his bedroom, and at a certain frequency, increased frequency, he's able to open a portal visible to all of us watching into Sedona, Arizona. Okay, I am not saying, for the record, that I believe this is true or not. I know that there's some strange things. I've seen some strange things myself, so I'm not going to pass any judgment on it, but it's an intriguing video. in my research, I happened upon this, when I found the video, it was actually accompanying an article that someone had written, and this person was sort of corroborating the process by which she was able to open this portal through sound. In some of her experiments has seen similar effects. So this idea of portal opening, we obviously are familiar with some of the things that CERN in Switzerland is alleged to be doing, opening up a portal to other dimensions. I don't know, haven't covered that, and I'm certainly not well read on that. However, the idea that there are portals, first of all, that in fact, I've heard cases of portals being coming into being through new construction. We can get into that later. I've got a couple of interesting stories about mini portals in homes. Nonetheless, are we living in a time where there are more portals opening? Who's instigating the portal opening? Is it people like this gentleman who are doing some funky experiments, working with some, I believe he said 525 hertz is the frequency that what allowed him to open this portal. Okay. It's just something to think about, folks. If portals are opening, strange lights in the sky being reported all over the place, not to mention Linda Moulton Howe's stellar reporting on big booms, how the lights and the booms are correlating, as in the case of one of the stories that I read, with the thunder sounds sort of accompanying what looked to be a meteor. All of these things are enough, I would say, not to mention our own day-to-day experience. I say, folks, keep your eyes open. You'll have your own little things, if you're paying attention, that you will notice are inconsistent and incongruent with reality as we knew it to be. So something's happening. Let's notice it. Let's pay attention. It's exciting times for sure. Let me close out as this is turning into a full-fledged show. I love talking to you all, so thanks for indulging me. And as usual, or as always, I should say, keep our minds, our eyes, our hearts open. Get ready, because some big things are happening. Wouldn't you agree? It is an exciting time. And I'm glad you are joining me along this journey. Thanks so much, folks. I'll talk to you real soon.